Okay. You comfortable there?
Yes.
Good, 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 good. Okay. Are we okay with mics and filming and everything else we're doing? Okay.
Testing, testing.
Good. So, all right. Terrific. Well, good morning and welcome. How's everyone doing? Awesome. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Amalia Duarte. I'm the chair for the Morris County Democratic Committee, and I'm also serving my third term on the Mendham Township Committee. And I want to thank everyone for coming to continue our series of forums featuring candidates for the U.S. Senate. I want to introduce my colleague, Darcy Drager. She's the Executive Board Secretary for Morris County Democrats. And she served, for those who don't know, in 2018 as the Morris County Chairwoman for Tom Malinowski's successful congressional campaign. And And she served as municipal chair for Chester Township and also ran for state assembly both in 2019 and 2020. So thank you, Darcy, for everything that you've done. All right, and so just the PSA that I've been doing at the beginning of all these forums, it's Morris County. We're always looking for people to run for local and county office. So if you want to think about running or volunteering, please visit our website, morrisdems.org, or Adam Cohen is here, as well as Shay Seif is at the check-in table. I know just about everybody here already is volunteering, but if you're not, now is the time. We're looking to build on our success from last year, where we got control of Chatham Township. We won a seat on the Parsippany Council, and we even have our first Democratic deputy mayor in my town of Mendham Township.
Yes.
That was awesome. All right, my final PSA is before we get started, just like at the movies, I'm going to ask you to please silence your cell phones and to please just be respectful. We are the Democratic Party, so we have a big tent of opinions and ideas, and that's what I love about being a Democrat, right? But let's just be respectful of each other and, of course, of our special guest this morning. Okay, so the way we'll start this off is, first of all, welcome
Thank
to Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina. I'm
you.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled that you were able to join us this morning, and I'm very excited that you're running
Thank
for
you.
U.S. Senate. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
We always talk about how we need more Latinas, more people of color, more women running for office, and she's doing it. So, yeah. So I want to give you an opportunity as we start off to just tell a little bit about yourself and why you've decided to run, and then we can get into some of our questions if that's good.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Thank you, Amalia, for inviting me and for hosting this event, and all of you for spending your Saturday morning making sure that you listen to all the ideas from all the candidates running for the United States Senate. So that's the core of our democracy, right? Us participating and engaging others into understanding what is at stake in every election. So I'm Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina, and I am running for the United States Senate. I have been lifelong, well, not lifelong resident, I've been a lifelong American, but I lived in Hunterdon County. I'm your next door neighbor. I lived there with my sons and my husband, and I know what it is like to work hard to build a Democratic Party in a red county. When I moved there in 2008, I got right on to working to build the party by supporting candidates at the local level, by recruiting people to join and volunteer at the local party. And I'm proud to say that under the leadership of our Lincoln Jones Perez, another proud Latina, we are turning Hunterdon blue, just like you are with the leadership of Amalia, turning this county blue. So thank you for the work that you do every day to build the party, because that's at the core what elections are about. So when I started, when the news about our current senator came out back in September, we were all very disappointed. And as a Latina leader in this state, it became clear to me that we needed to stop accepting moral leadership that didn't have, that wasn't a good example for our children. I have two boys, and I had been a long-time activist of the Democratic Party. And I felt at that moment that we could no longer accept leadership that let our children down. And we have to aspire as leaders to look for a moral leadership that transforms our idea of a democracy. Our democracy is about engaging everyday citizens in the business of government, and government is supposed to be about the business of people, not about the business of self-interest or the business of corporate America and billionaires. So fundamentally, when I became people started calling me and said, "You should run, you should run. We need a woman. We need to fight for representation for working class people. We need to fight for representation for 21% of the population in the state that is Latina, and we need a woman to step up." At that point, I am a working woman. I lead a labor research center at Cornell University at the ALR school. I'm a faculty at the School of Industrial Labor Relations at Cornell University. Yes, this Latina girl has 3 degrees. Because as women, we always have to be better prepared than everybody else to be taken seriously. So I took that very seriously. So at that point, I said, well, let me keep having conversations with leaders across the state. And with the number one reason that came about for why there needed to be a woman of color to run is because fundamentally we need to have a vision for the state that is different, that fights for everyday working people, that fights for middle class families, that fights for workers, and gives a new leadership to advance key issues around immigration reform, about the rights of workers to join unions, and the right for a corporate America to actually respect the rights of workers. Right? That is their responsibility, and they're not doing it. So that's what I'm running, because I want every Latina girl out there, I want every Black girl out there that comes from a working class family to know the story of this daughter of the working class. I am an immigrant woman. I came to the United States at 14 years old, following my parents, who were political refugees of the war of Central America, El Salvador, in the 1980s. My parents did not receive political asylum because at that time, Ronald Reagan refused to give Central Americans political asylum. Remember, I'm telling you the story because that's the story that we're seeing at the border today. It didn't change. It took me 8 years to reunite with my parents. I suffered family separation. But despite that family separation, when I finally got to the United States at 14 years old, I lived in a community that was safe, that had a public school system that wanted me to learn English, a public school system that invested in me and allowed me the opportunity to get a scholarship and attend an Ivy League university at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. So as this daughter of a public education, of an immigrant family, my mother is a housekeeper, my father is a janitor. This daughter of workers who never had health insurance, who had 2, 3, 4 jobs, they had to choose between getting sick and going to work sick or not having enough money to pay the rent at the end of the month. This daughter of the working class is now able to have the dream to say, I want to represent every daughter of the working class, every worker in the United States Senate. That's the American dream, and I am the American dream story. And that's the story I want to take to the United States Senate. So finally, I want to go to the United States Senate because for Donald Trump, this Latina Jersey girl is the worst nightmare. He is out there making his campaign about how immigrants are poisoning the blood of America, how those immigrants who are trying to get here are ruining our opportunity to advance the middle class, and they're pitting immigrants and Black workers against white workers. And what we need to tell Donald Trump is that this immigrant story is about an immigrant story that gets the job done, that brings people together and inspires all workers to actually fight against corporate America. We need to inspire working people to come back to the Democratic Party because we need to build a Democratic Party that fights for their wages, that fights for their unions, that fights for their health care. And we need to stop accommodating to corporate America and to Jeff Bezos, who all he wants to do is shoot himself to the moon and ruin another planet. So we need to stand up and fight. And this Latina Jersey girl labor champion will go to the United States Senate and stand up and be Donald Trump's worst nightmares if you send me to the United States Senate.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We're going to start off with our questions now, and we've been starting off these forums with sort of the tough question. So I'd like to ask you to begin um, about ranked choice voting. And would you support ranked choice voting for this primary race where there are four candidates? We don't know about Menendez yet, so four, and a good chance that the winner may receive less than 50% of the vote. So, what are your thoughts about ranked choice voting?
I I will support ranked choice voting because what we fundamentally need here in New Jersey is an ability for voters to have a voice and have a choice. We need that's one option. That's one option. Ranked choice vote is an option, and we should consider it. We also should consider putting all the candidates in a ballot. All the candidates are running for office, for federal office, in one ballot, so that we can actually differentiate between the different opinions of the candidates and actually make a choice based on what you have learned about those candidates. So I also support the fair ballots proposal to put candidates in one ballot running for the same office. Fundamentally, I also support changing our ballot system in New Jersey. I have a long record, and I'm not new to this game like Andy Kim. I've been advocating for the last 20 years to actually don't abolish the county line. And I'll tell you why. Not every county in New Jersey is like Morris County or my own county of Hunterdon County or the convention that I participated 2 weeks ago in Mammoth County. They all gave me the opportunity, like you are doing today, to come talk to the delegates, to call the delegates, to put my positions to the delegates, and then you all vote for me or for whoever you choose as the best representative. That is an open process for a convention, and I commend all of you for doing that open process in the convention as a party, even though after you vote, you still are going to choose the county line. If every county in New Jersey was as open as Morris County is, we wouldn't be having a debate about the line or the process of election. But the problem is that in the big counties, where the majority of voters for a statewide election live, and we're talking about Essex County, we're talking about Hudson County, we're talking about Passaic County and Middlesex County, they have closed conventions. I have not been invited to any of those conventions. They do not allow the opportunity for me to talk to delegates. The decision has already been made, and it has been made to favor one candidate who is a political insider, who is Tammy Murphy, who is funded by the same political insiders that are fund our elections and who are channeling money to secure that the insider gets reelected. And fundamentally, I've been a leader of an organization called Latina Civic, and we train Latinas to run for office, and some of you sitting here have gone through that academy, Ella Wins. We had trained over 400 women together with the Center for American Women in Politics, women of color, to run for office. And the number one problem that Latina women and women of color, Black women have, is that the line favors incumbents. And therefore, there's not a lot of openings for women of color to enter for office. And I always said, if you wait until you're given a seat, we're gonna be waiting for a long time. So you're gonna have to build your own seat and take it and take a space, because otherwise they will never give us a space to run. So this run is also about saying this party, the party of Democrats, who tells Black and Latino voters and urban voters and working class voters that is the voters of diversity, that we need working class people to vote for them. It needs to open up space for working class people, for poor working people, for Black and Latinas to run for office, and it's not doing it. So therefore, that's why I fundamentally support other options rather than the line, because we need to actually make the Democratic Party a party that lives up to its commitment to be inclusive of Black and Latinas and Black and Latino voters and working class voters. So Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into perhaps less controversial, some controversial topics, but we'll start off with something that unfortunately we're seeing more and more issues with, which is flooding in our area. And recently we've had flooding in, Chester, Dover, Denville, really all over Morris County, and no doubt in Hunterdon as well and throughout the state. So it's a combination of the snow storms that we've had, and then suddenly it gets warm again, but it really ties into climate change. So the question is, if you are elected as a senator, how would you help us combat the risks of flooding in our communities?
First of all, I want to say that we need to elect leaders who believe that climate change is an existential threat to our democracy and to our way of life. There are no ifs and buts. The science tells us that we do have a crisis, that the planet is warming up and it's not going to get any better. We have, under President Biden, received the largest investment in green infrastructure and resilience infrastructure to invest in figuring out how to create a more resilient infrastructure to protect our cities and to create better, better water and flooding system. So we need to send somebody to the United States Senate who actually will continue to fight for more investment on our infrastructure so we can upgrade our infrastructure. That's number one. I commit to continue and to go to the Senate and stand with President Biden as he continues to look to fund critical infrastructure and green energy investment. Second of all, we need to figure out, and this is an issue of how do we bring back more federal resources to New Jersey. We are a donor state. We only bring back about 79 cents into projects to New Jersey out of every dollar that we give to the federal government. We need to bring back more of our federal funds to actually create, support communities that are suffering from flooding. Every time I see communities like Wayne or right here in the county, in my own county, areas that are are close to rivers or which have never been able to build around them, I think that we need to figure out how to give relief to those communities and help them build better infrastructure with the river structure, but also, if necessary, uh, uh, buy them out of their property so that they can move and build better systems in those areas. So that is a responsibility of the federal government, and through coordination with FEMA and our federal system, we need to figure out how to give direct assistance to homeowners that are in flooding areas. In the long term, we need to decrease our reliance on fossil fuel energy and continue to expand green energy, solar energy, and the wind energy in our state so that we can actually reduce our carbon emissions and allow for the future of this planet to get back to the normal trend. And it's always been a normal trend of cold and warm, but right now we're spending too much time in the warm side of the change. So we need to actually move forward with investment in green energy and more policies to actually engage communities that are impacted, because there is, I know that we have a debate on wind energy in some of our ocean areas, but I think what that needs is more engagement with our local communities so that we can actually hear their concerns, and also more engagement with our urban areas who also suffer from what we call climate injustice, that we need to engage them more on what are the solutions to bring to our urban areas on climate change.
All right, thank you. Darcy, do you want to take the next question? Because I think she answered
Yes,
the one I was going to ask
absolutely.
already. So go ahead.
Turning to another issue, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade in 2022, some states are making it increasingly difficult for women to access all manners of reproductive health care, at times endangering their lives. 14 states have banned abortion, and another 11 states have severely restricted access. And we just saw this week with Arkansas saying that embryos are, oh, excuse me, Alabama. My apologies.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed that this crowd is just like, no, no, wait. We are all
You got it,
following
yeah.
this issue. Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, are saying that embryos are people. So, what legislation would you present to protect abortion access and reproductive access across the country?
Well, fundamentally, what we need to do is to send a United States senator that will actually fight for our reproductive freedom by actually pushing legislation that will change, that will put ethics requirements on our Supreme Court, that will limit the ability of billionaires to wine and dine Supreme Court justices and then in request for favors, which is like of banning our reproductive freedom. So a stronger ethics rule for our Supreme Court. We also need to consider, we need to use all the tools in the toolbox that we already have. We don't need new legislation. We need to actually consider expanding the court or putting age limits on the court. And we also need to actually take action on ending the filibuster. I mean, because this is how we got to this point. When the Supreme Court and when the Senate didn't allow President Obama to actually appoint a Supreme Court justice that was more aligned with the rights of women. So we do have tools in the toolbox right now to actually change and influence the makeup of the court. And what we need is to send a United States senator who is willing to actually say, let's end the filibuster for appointments and let's actually change the makeup of the court so that we can actually stand for protecting our women's freedom to choose. We also need to expand coverage of abortion access and reproductive health care justice for poor working women, because the right to reproductive freedom, which is fundamental for women, and we need to make sure that we elect a senator that will go and fight for reproductive freedom. What we need to do is actually fight for more funding for reproductive health care justice for poor women and for women of color and for working class women. Because if you don't have access to reproductive health care, then you don't have access to reproductive freedom. And so all through, here in New Jersey, I have supported efforts to actually give more assistance to poor women to actually access from birth control to, if they are in a position to want to have an abortion or need to have an abortion. And it is their choice whether to do that we actually provide affordable health care for them. So I always said that my position is more expansive than just the reproduction freedom. It's actually, I will fight for the right for a woman to have a child, not to have a child, and if they have a child, to have the best health care possible, to raise that child, to give them the best opportunity they have to live a life that they are meant to have. And that's why I always supported Medicare for all. And I didn't just change my mind 2 weeks ago about Medicare for all like Tammy Murphy did. I didn't tell people, I didn't tell our revolution, and I'm a member of a revolution in New Jersey 6 years ago that would support Medicare for all, and then went to Congress and didn't do anything about it like Andy Kim. I went around this state for 6 years, getting 50 municipalities in New Jersey to adopt Medicare for all resolutions. So I done the work to advance Medicare for all for 6 years, and I will continue to do so when I get to United States Senate.
Excellent. That pivots to my next question, which is talking about social programs like Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, Social Security. Republicans have been focused on killing or privatizing them. What policies do you support to maintain those programs for the next generation without resorting to massive benefit cuts?
We actually need to start taxing billionaires. We actually need to start putting more responsibility on corporate America, paying their fair share. We actually need to reverse the tax cut that we gave billionaires, under Trump, and we need to get more money back to working class families. So I will be one of those candidates who will say, how do we fund an expansion of Medicare for the 10% of Americans that don't have access to Medicare? We actually tax the billionaires more. We actually, yes, that deserves an applause. We actually stop fiddling around the ages of our tax set up. We actually need to say, if we want to invest in infrastructure, if we want to invest in good jobs, if we want to invest in Medicare for all, we actually need to get those who are doing better than the rest of America. And we have a huge gap of income inequality and wealth inequality in this country. The gap has grown huge. Corporate CEOs their wages are in the thousands and millions of dollars, while working class people are still earning a federal minimum wage of $7.25. In the last fight that UAW had in Michigan was to make sure that the car companies who had been bailed out by us, the citizens in 2009, actually paid working class people making our cars be higher than the minimum wage and actually get back to paying a living wage. And you probably didn't know that after we bail out the car companies, there was an agreement made that most new jobs will be the federal minimum wage. So though the people who are making our cars, while GMC and Ford CEOs were cashing out their billionaires in their profits, those workers were actually making a minimum wage of 15 or below, and they didn't have health insurance. So what I will do also to change that, I will also support workers' rights to have a union and work it, because the unions are the power that can increase a middle class. And we need union strength to be able to balance the billionaire class abuse on our wages and our lack of investment in our tax base. So that's what I would do.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Okay, I'll take the next question. And I love how you're actually answering several questions at the same time. So we're going to skip through a few. But just piggybacking on what you just talked about. So do you support a wealth tax, which is something that's been talked about?
Yes, I do. I do support a wealth tax. I was reading a report by the New Jersey Social Justice Institute, which says that the wealth gap in New Jersey for Black families and the wealth gap between a Black family and a white family. Black family's wealth is about $17,000. The median wealth is about $17,000, and a white family is about $320,000. The median. It's the median, yes. That is huge, right? And we can say there's not a structure that I'm not blaming anybody for that individually, but there is a systematic reason for that wealth gap, and is the lack of access to capital for Black and Latinos and entrepreneurs, the lack of access to good homes for working class kids. It's very hard now for a starter family to be able to afford a first-time home. It has other issues to do with affordable housing and a lack of affordable first-time homes in the state. But it has to do with structural issues of racism and who gets impacted, who has access to education, who has access to live in neighborhoods that were redlined during the 60s and 70s, and who's moving into what neighborhood. So there's a lot of reasons for that. But fundamentally, what we need to do is actually tax those who are better off and invest in opportunities for those who are less better off in this state and in this country. So I will support a wealth tax and figuring out how to get around, not paying the wealth tax, which is something that if you have good tax attorneys, they're able to do. Avoid that legislation. It is working class Americans and working class people pay a higher level of taxes on their income than billionaires and Wall Street investors. So we need to figure out how to redo our tax code so that it is more progressive than what it is right now.
Right, thank you. So shifting a little bit, but still talking about economic issues. So according to Forbes magazine, over the past 30 years, tuition costs at public colleges rose from about 4,000 to almost 11,000, at private colleges from about 20,000 to 40,000. And that's adjusted for inflation. So the average New Jersey college student graduates with about $35,000 in debt. As a senator, how would you address the student loan crisis and college affordability?
I will vote for immediate debt relief of all the debt held by students at this moment in time. I want to commend President Biden. He last week, this week actually, I don't released his latest plan to forgive student debt from another group of students. But there's many more students that are carrying way too much student debt for their education, and there is a reason for that. In the 2000s, I graduated from college in 1996. And back then, we still were funding Pell Grants, we still were funding financial aid, we still were funding public universities at a higher rate. We still have Fannie Mae who was giving student loans at a very low rate. So I came out of college with about $20,000 for for a regular degree and for a master's degree. Imagine that. A student by the 2000s, there was a political choice made by elected officials in the 1990s to stop funding Pell Grants, to stop funding financial aid, and then we privatized the student loans debt. And that made a lot of people billionaires, privatizing from giving students loans. And they made it easy to sign up for loans, right? I remember you could go to a college and they will have sign up for your loan without your parents being able to co-sign. So some people want to blame the students for taking on so much loan, but if you told a student that a 4-year education was your ticket to the middle class, and then you fail to invest in public education for those students, whose responsibility is? We promised the students that if they got a degree, they were going to come out and get a professional job with a career. Instead, what students came out in the 2000s is with a 4-year education, and the only job they could find was an Amazon warehouse, or the only job they could find was at a Starbucks for the minimum wage. So there has been a political choice made to put the burden of public education in the backs of the children of working class families. That was a political choice, and what we need to do now is to forgive that debt, because it was a political failure of our leadership in the 2000s to put that burden on those students. So just like we forgave the debt of bankers and Wall Street millionaires in 2002 with a signature by Congress, we should be able to forgive the debt of students in the same manner and just wipe it out. Now, President Biden presented a plan when he got elected to forgive student debt, because that was the Bernie revolution, and I was part of the Bernie revolution in 2016 and 2020, put it as a priority for working class people and for the children of the working class, or for Black students, for Latino students. And he made that a priority. So President Biden adopted that policy, and he presented a plan to Congress to forgive student debt. It wasn't approved. And one of the congressmen who didn't vote to forgive student debt, and I'm going to remind you about this, was Andy Kim. So when we are talking about who's the real progressive on this race, we must hold Andy Kim accountable for the vote where his opposition to student debt relief at the first time President Biden brought it up. Now, since then, President Biden has been doing it little by little. He has put different groups, put different requirements, but he's moving the needle forward on forgiveness of student debt relief. And I want to go to the United States Senate to make sure that we clean it, we wipe it out, and we give the children of working class people an opportunity to build an American dream, just like I did moving forward.
Right. And Darcy,
Okay.
you're next.
The office that you're seeking is a legislative position at the federal level. And I think you've touched on what in your background prepares you for the legislative and federal aspects of the office. But given the partisan gridlock in Congress, how do you think you could move legislation forward when we are seeing just a complete lack of comity and cooperation in our chambers of Congress?
I am at heart a community organizer. I am at heart a union organizer. I have been a union representative my entire life. And when you are a union representative and you're trying to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, you have to organize your coalition, you have to organize your stakeholders, you have to organize workers to have strong demands about what you want. But ultimately, you have to get to the negotiating table and make a deal. So I am all about making an agreement and being able to, I should write my own book about the art of the deal. It will be about how you bring people along to cut a deal that works for people. So um, I believe that the way Democrats get back to actually cutting agreements that bring that move closer to our democratic values of fairness and justice and investment in people is that we actually have to organize our base. We actually have to organize voters that think like us. We actually have to go talk to working class voters that feel disaffected from the Democratic Party because we have not given them solutions to their everyday problems like a good wage with a good job. We had to be able to get Black voters to be fully engaged in our democracy. We had to get Latino voters that are not participating to participate. Working class, we had to give them a reason to engage. And once we do that, we are able to have positions that are progressive, that we can move the needle forward and negotiate with the Republican Party. I am not of the belief that I have to be more like a Republican to get a deal done in the United States Congress. What I am of the beliefs is that we actually need to go to our urban centers, we need to go to our working class neighborhoods and give those voters a reason to vote. And if we do that, we are going to elect leaders who have the grassroots and who have the ability to build coalitions to the United States Senate. So what I would tell all of you is that New Jersey is supposed to be a progressive state. We are supposed to be fighting for our progressive values that Senator Booker and a previous senator was fighting for. We do not need to send a moderate Democrat to the United States Senate. We need to send a progressive Democrat to the United States Senate, not to go negotiate with the right wing of the Republican Party. We need to send a progressive Democrat to actually bring people along so that we can actually represent what the majority of Americans want. We want affordable health care. We want a right to have a union. We want peace in the Middle East. We want immigration reform that addresses the root causes of migration and doesn't just talk about building a wall. And we also need to invest in our young people and in higher education that gives them careers that we need. So that's what we need coalitions for. And as a union organizer who always have to figure out at the end of a campaign, how am I going to cut a deal? I gotta be able to have my stakeholder support, my coalition support, and that's what I will bring to this office, the ability to do that.
Excellent, thank you. One of the major concerns for this coming presidential election is the spread of lies and fake news. How could you help stop the proliferation of misleading information that might sway voters?
Well, first of all, I think that we as leaders, we need to do a better job of communicating uh, with our constituencies, with our organizations that we represent, and figure out how to uh, help them understand the difference between fake and real news and what is a legitimate source of information, what's not. I do that with my kids. My kids are on YouTube all the time or TikTok, and they say, "Mom, I just heard this," and I say, like, what was the source? And I put in my teacher hat because at the end I'm I'm a teacher. So I say, did you check the source of that information? That is not accurate. But I know that in a mass scale we cannot do that with everybody. But there is a responsibility of the federal government in uh, in regulating what our media communications are putting out there. And so the federal government has a role to play in regulating the flow of information and and being more even-handed in holding media corporations accountable for the content that they're allowed to put out there. During the 1990s, with the regulated communications, the communications regulations, we actually allow for more private control over our media channels. We reduced the number of public access radio, public access channels. I think we need to go back to expanding that. And then we also have to get the FEC to actually regulate what's out there in our communication channels and whether media companies are actually reducing the amount of fake information that they're putting out there. And also, we need to figure out how to regulate our social media and our data corporations. I think there's a lot of hearings right now about what's the responsibility of Congress to regulate Mega, the owners of Facebook. But there's also the data mining. You know how companies are data mining. Amazon, one of their most prolific areas of business is actually they mine our data and they control what we get and they sell it. They make profit every time you click. They're making a profit on you. So there's this whole effort that we need to step up in Congress on regulating our data technology firms and how do we actually secure our information that is out there public. Because fundamentally, our democracy uh, doesn't survive if we don't know to distinguish between real news, fake news, alternative news. And I said it used to be truth and a fact, and now we have alternative facts, and so we need to go back to being able to respect knowledge and information, and I think that that's a role that the federal government needs to play.
Right. So why don't we, thank you for your answer. And we were going to ask you next about the filibuster, but you already answered that. So let's go back talking about immigration. You know, you told your story about your family and the challenges they faced. I'm a first generation American, as you know, my parents from the Dominican Republic, and immigration is a top issue right now in elections. So if you could just tell us, you know, what are your views on immigration? Where do you stand on immigration reform? How would you address it if you were sent to the Senate?
Yeah, this is a issue dear to my heart. Yeah, I told you earlier, I am a daughter of political refugees from the Central American wars who never received political asylum. I suffered family separation. It took us years to get back together. So what we're seeing in the news today at the border is my story. So when I always said that we need more people to actually understand that story and work towards solutions. And this is one of those instances in which our current senator was actually a leading voice on immigration reform. And he had proposed several strong bills, comprehensive bills to address the crisis. And unfortunately, because he finds himself in the legal quandary that he's at, he's no longer able to provide leadership to those issues. With that said, I have been working for the last 30 years to create the coalitions and the support needed to advance comprehensive immigration reform. As the executive director of the Worker Institute, we're one of the leading think tanks in figuring out legislative proposals to advance the rights of workers in this country, of immigrant workers, to work for a path to citizenship for our undocumented workers, and to protect the rights of Dreamers and TPS workers. So I have the dearth of knowledge about policy solutions of how to get there. But what we need to do, and I always talk about immigration reform in a three-legged stool to solve the crisis. First of all, we will not solve the immigration crisis by focusing just on the security, on building the wall. That is a Donald Trump political ploy to get the working class and middle class people uh, uh, against immigrants, to turn us against immigrants and forget that we are a country of immigrants. So we will not stop the crisis by building the wall and by focusing only on the militarization of the wall. What we need to do to start with is my number one solution. It has to do with our foreign policy. And we need to create an engagement with Latin America, beginning with Central America and Venezuela and Haiti and Cuba, who are the biggest senders of migrants to the world, to actually find solutions to their economic, security, and democracy concerns right now that are sending people north. We do not have a clear engagement with Latin America about creating problems. And remember, I came from a time where the State Department had a different type of policy over there. So I'm not talking about going to a policy of the 80s of intervention. I'm talking about creating partnerships that addresses the pushing factors of the migration so that it doesn't become a battle at the border. Right now, it's like people just keep coming because their economic and social instability and security instability in those countries is so grave, and nobody's paying attention to it. So I will first engage in creating real partnerships with Latin America, Cuba. We have in Haiti, which are the biggest senders of migrants. Number two, we need to actually create a solution to a refugee crisis. Donald Trump defunded and obliterated the process of how to receive and integrate refugees into this country. So we need to go back to refund our resettlement programs, to expediting refugee application processes, and to actually giving those workers a permit to work while they wait for the adjudication of their cases. Because right now, they can be waiting for 6 months to 2 years before their cases are adjudicated. And in the meantime, they become the responsibility of the local municipalities or the local states that receives them. So we need to fund the resettlement programs, and then we need to give those refugees the right to work while they wait for adjudication. And remember, if you're a political refugee, you're fleeing danger. You are fleeing life and death situations, and saying that you're just gonna send them back to wait in their countries is forgetting who we are as Americans and not accepting our human responsibility to actually look out for those fleeing crisis and keeping families together. Number three, we need to actually create a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented workers who are fully employed in this country. They're fully employed. They have a labor force participation of about 80%. So you know who they are because they work in our towns. They come clean our homes. They come clean our yards. They work in our restaurants. They're the ones, our nurses taking care of our kids. They're working. And so, but we have accepted that they exist without any rights. So we need to give them a path to citizenship. And that will reduce the pool as well, because a lot of these families cannot reunite. And you create this permanent family separation with immigrant workers, and we not continue to accept that. I fundamentally I have represented unions that represent immigrant workers. And in those same unions, you have American workers and Black workers. And what we do as union organizers is to create this understanding that American workers, Black workers, and if you are a third and fourth generation immigrant worker, your strength to have a good job is only as strong as the strength of an undocumented worker to have a good job. So it's in our common interest to fight for our neighbors who don't have the right to be recognized as Americans, because if they don't have rights, we won't have rights.
Great, thank you. Um, So continuing to talk about sort of international issues, I believe today is the second anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the horrible atrocities happening over there. How would you propose helping the Senate to quickly increase aid to Ukraine?
Let me start saying an answer to Ukraine by saying that fundamentally we need to go back to a foreign policy that supports democracy and also supports peace. And we need to do that first by creating, by, by, by demanding our elected officials to take a position for peace in the Middle East and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, because we cannot continue to just give military aid and military assistance to one country and not hold them accountable for violations of international human rights law and its execution of their military policy in that country. So right now, if we are to have a real discussion about Ukraine in a position of aiding Ukraine to defend their democracy, we cannot have that discussion without having a discussion about ceasefire and holding Israel accountable for the death of about 20,000 Palestinian children and families. So if we do that, if we call, and I've been one of the main candidates who has called for a ceasefire in Gaza to protect innocent civilians, so that then we can move into a discussion of peace in the Middle East, because our responsibility as the military power in the world, and we are the military power in the world with the strongest army and the highest level of investment in military weapons. Our responsibility should be to promote peace. So we have to promote peace in the Middle East. And then when we go to Ukraine, Ukraine is fighting for their democracy against a foreign invader. So it's in my position that as long as the people of Ukraine are fighting for their democracy, and we are supporting them in their fight for democracy, that I am all for supporting the people of Ukraine in standing against the invasion of Russia. So I support that. But it has to have accountability. Both sides, if we support Ukraine in their fight for democracy, we also have to hold them accountable for respect of international human rights and just like we want to hold Israel accountable for the same. So that's my position on foreign aid. Fundamentally, I will always be a candidate for peace. I am a child of war. I lived through the civil war in El Salvador. I know how it impacts families, it separates families, it destroys neighborhoods, it destroyed my town. So I know the pain of war, and I will always fight for peace.
Thank you.
Staying focused on foreign policy here, what is your position on the One China policy? Should the U.S. continue to recognize Taiwan, and should we commit to supporting them in the event of military action by China?
Um, the people of Taiwan have engaged in a process of building their own democracy. I think we also ought to respect the wishes of the people of Taiwan and advance our position as a country that supports democratic processes in other countries and respect the choices of those citizens. So I will for supporting the people of Taiwan to keep, to do what they want to do as citizens. That ties into how do we manage their relationship with China, which is a complicated, and we can do a whole one-day seminar on how we we relate to China. But I can tell you my experience in dealing with China. When I served in the Labor Advisory Committee for President Clinton, then Bush, and then when I came back to be part of the Labor Advisory Committee for President Obama, our relationship with China, what it's always been about our trade relationships, our interest to continue um, trading with China. And in that relationship, we have always focused on laws that favor corporate America over the rights of Chinese workers to actually fight for their own democracy in China. So I was one of the advocates during the fights of the PNTR, the preferential trade agreement with China, to actually put greater oversight over our our demands on the Chinese government to actually respect independent unions in China, to actually respect democracy movements in China, to create power for the Chinese working class. And so I think we need to not just think about Taiwan as an isolated country, but there's actually people in China fighting for their own democracy. And we tend to forget that our responsibility as the biggest trading partner of China is to actually support the democracy movements that are happening in China, and to hold the Chinese government, which it is it's a communist regime who is very interested in a capitalist model of production, right? Which exploits workers. We need to demand more from the Chinese government to actually respect human rights in China and to respect the right of workers to have independent unions in China. And we can do that through our trade agreements, and we have not done so. So I will be advocating for stronger labor rights on our trade agreements and any renewal partnership with China, and also to advance environmental rights for people in China, because that is also creating a crisis for Chinese workers in China. So that's how I would deal with China in a more comprehensive way than just focusing on what they're trying to do to Taiwan. There is a lot we can do to actually engage in a more proactive way with the people of China, not just with the government of China.
Right, thank you. So before we close out, I just wanted to open it up. If anyone in the room has a question, we can take a couple of questions. We've covered a lot in the past hour or so, but if anyone has a question on a topic that we didn't hit yet, Carol, did you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Amaya. Thank you, Darcy. Thank you, Dr. Patricia Campos. I don't have a question.
Wait, hold on. There's a mic coming, just so we can make sure it's recorded.
Hello.
Usually when I ask questions, I prepare them in advance, and I did not prepare anything for you today. But I have to, and I'm sorry I'm so emotional about it. I have never, in 30 years watching candidates, being a candidate myself, witnessed the courage that I saw you display today. I am floored. And I know you're courageous. I've seen you do this a million times and advised me to do it. But you said we cannot call for peace without accountability. And you have no idea how meaningful those words are here today for many of us. You didn't have to say anything about Gaza. You were asked about Ukraine. Nobody asked you about Gaza. And for you to name that, knowing that could lose you the support of people in this room, forget out in the world, that is a courage that I wish every working class girl, Latina, person, resident, citizen, immigrant could see. And I just thank you.
I think do I see it?
Oh, okay, we've got
You
a
decide who you
couple.
take.
So I see if we could take the woman with the turquoise, we'll do that question. I see a question in the back, and then we'll come back to you. Okay, so we're going to do 4 questions. I know we've a lot. Well, we'll see.
I have 2 questions, actually, very different. One. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the first question is, what is your opinion about foreign ownership of American property, lands, property? And the other question is, what is your view on guns and gun reform? Thank you.
No, good.
Okay, you're gonna take.
I'm just trying to point to the next one.
Let me start with the question on gun control. It pains me. I have 2 boys. They're about to go to high school next year at Voorhees High School. They're 13 years old. But it pains me that now at their local school in Hunterdon County, which is a safe county, that they're having gun shooter drills instead of fire drills. It pains me that we have to get this alert of saying, there is active shooter alert at Voorhees High School, and we're in shutdown mode. And because it is scary right now, looking at the celebration of the Super Bowl victory last week, when we were watching, celebrate the victory, of that a parade, and there was a shooter, and everybody, and a kid was killed. That is a reality that we should not be living here in the United States. That to be afraid of people with guns and that type of danger. So I am for gun control reform and for banning assault weapons, so that we can actually put those weapons away from regular citizens. If you are a responsible gun owner and you want to have a sports gun, you should be able to do that in a responsible way. But weapons of war, assault weapons, do not belong in the hands of regular citizens, and we should ban them. On foreign ownership of U.S. land, I will have to read more about what that is and what are I don't know much, so I'll be honest. But my concern would be who's buying the land, and what gets you the land, and and what are the protections around that. I mean, one of the issues that bothers me is that, and it's connected to the immigration policy, is that if you are a foreign investor and you can buy a property of $10 million in the United States, you immediately get a green card and a path to citizenship. And, and so I always concerned about, millionaires buying a citizenship just because they can afford to buy real estate in the United States. So I would be concerned about that. And also limitations on access to public lands and limitation, in our coast. We have a big issue in Puerto Rico with that. And Puerto Rico is an American state. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and we're having this issue about access to the beach properties, and Puerto Rican citizens, what American citizens, not losing access to the beach because billionaires from other countries are coming and buying entire properties in front of and closing access to Puerto Ricans to beaches. I think that is a concern for me. And remember, Puerto Rico doesn't have a United States senator, and Puerto Rico has Puerto Ricans are one of the largest Latino groups in New Jersey, and whoever is a United States senator from New Jersey has a role to play in making sure that Puerto Ricans in the island have a vote in the United States Senate. So I always said, on that issue, I am with the people of Puerto Rico who do not want to lose access to their pristine beaches because billionaires are buying up the land in Puerto Rico.
There's a question in the back. Yeah, okay.
So the Senate is the body that distributes money and decides how our money is going to be spent. Given that the UN division, UNRWA, that at least a dozen UNRWA members were directly involved in the atrocities that occurred on October 7th in Israel, and that thousands more stood either in direct support or indirect support, that they are members themselves of Hamas, that several were shown to have held hostages in their homes, possibly others, because there are still hostages in Gaza. And those hostages are going through horrendous things which you don't seem to have addressed. Given that UNRWA keeps the Palestinian people in a state of perpetual refugee status, to nobody's benefit except perhaps their own, and that they educate the children of Gaza and the West Bank to literally hate and kill Jews, to hate Israel, and to hate America. And don't think for a moment that that is not true. We have seen the books, we have heard the testimonies. Given all of these things, where do you stand with the US decision to end funding for this organization? And where do you stand on the continued existence of the UNRWA organization?
From the beginning of my announcement of my race for the United States Senate, I have been unequivocal in my statement that I condemn the terrorist attacks of Hamas on the people of Israel, and that in response to those attacks, Israel has the right to defend itself and to go after Hamas as a terrorist organization. So I had never those attacks were atrocious and a violation of international rights and human rights. So I condemn those. As we had seen in the progress of the war, though, is that the response has increased the atrocities and the destruction of an entire population of Palestinians in the region, and that what we need to do is to focus on protecting the lives of children, mothers and kids in the West Bank and in Gaza. I also call for the release of the hostages from both sides. There is hostages being held on both sides, and we both need to be able to have a discussion on the on that. And I had called for the release of hostages. So wars are terrible. Wars are not what we should be promoting, but we should be promoting we have to have war. There are international rules for engaging in war, and those are under the UN has those international rules. But I'm gonna get to your answer. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna get to your question.
Let's let her answer
in
the
the
question.
in the process of conducting war, there are international laws that protect the lives of civilians, women and children, medical operations, public spaces. And so we need to, and the UN has a role to play on that. Now, we have to have an investigation as to the members of the UN organization who were engaged in the acts that they were accused of engaging on. But because of those 12 members of a huge organization of thousands of people get accused of doing that, there ought to be a trial and investigation. But in the meantime, you have millions of Gazans and Palestinians who need assistance from the UN. And we cannot defund that organization and allow the people of Palestine to go hungry and to die for a lack of medicine and medical supply. So I am all for an investigation. I am all for holding those people who were found to be engaged in terrorist acts to be held accountable. But at the same time, the UN has a responsibility, and the World Health Organization has a responsibility to serve the dignity of those victims that are in the middle of war right now. And I think that we cannot turn a blind eye to that and do not make sure that the people of Palestine who are refugees, are hungry, don't have medical access, don't have medicine, actually get the services that they need to survive this war.
Okay, let's take one more question. Yeah, this gentleman had his hand up first.
Do I have to push a button or something? Hello. Well, this is considerably less significant, I suppose, than the questions that have been asked. But with regard to election law in New Jersey, first place, the Election Law Enforcement Commission has been neutered. It can only investigate for up to 2 years after an infraction instead of the 10, which disables 80% of the cases before it. And also, with respect to the reforms in election law, what would you think of allowing candidates to run on more than one party line and have all the votes for that candidate from all the party lines counted for that candidate? Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question. It actually already happens in New York State. In New York State, you can run in more than one party. And that's how the Working Families Party has been successful in New York State to elect Democrats who are both aligned with working family values. So that is a change that needs a statute, that needs a law change in New Jersey to be able to run the more than one party line. And I'm fully supportive of that. I am a member of New Jersey Working Families and a board member and one of the founding board members of that organization. And we have always said that if we were able to have the same ability to run candidates in the working families, a slate in New Jersey, that we will be doing much better in electing Democrats to support working people in unions. So I will be supportive of that. That requires action by the legislature. Abolishing the line doesn't. That's an option of the Democratic Party at the local level and at the state level. So we do need legislative action for that, and we do not need legislative action to abolish the line. We can do it. All of you can vote to do it on your own.
If you have a question on a different topic. Okay, Adam, do you mind? And that's going to be our final, because if I'm if I'm looking at the clock right, we're almost at 12:30. I'd like to give Patricia a chance to wrap up too. So go ahead.
Hi, as a parent of a trans child who is in high school, and as an advocate for LGBTQ students, um, there was in Oklahoma there was recently a killing of their with in a bathroom by their peers, a child only 16 years old, whose transgender was hurt so bad that they died in a beating. The school did not handle it well. The authorities didn't handle it well. The Oklahoma has anti-trans policies that hurt our children. In here in New Jersey, we have seen a lot of Moms for Liberty people infiltrating the Board of Education meetings by brought in by the Republican Party, which it makes I believe that a lot of losing votes have hurt the Republican Party because they are aligning with Moms of Liberty. As a parent, as I said, I am so scared sometimes for my child. I will not support anybody who does not say what they're gonna do. So, for example, I watched Andy Kim, I watched Tammy Murphy Oldies. I'm not voting for them for other reasons, but um, Dr. Patricia, what would you do to protect our children, specifically the attacks for trans students and LGBTQ students?
We must do all that we can to make sure that the rights of our LGBTQ class, our children, our transgender children are protected and are under the law and in our schools through our regulations, through encouraging that their voices be heard and their experiences be respected and included in our curriculum and in our everyday practices. This is one of those, equal opportunity and equal rights extends to LGBTQ plus and trans kids. And I will do all that I can to advance those protections at the federal level through our Department of Education and through our Office of Civil Rights, and to make sure that those are abided all the way down to our local schools. Now, at the local level, we need to be like the army of the anti-moms for liberty. We need to train our women, our mom and parents to actually run for school board. And I know, we have a leader here who is a representative of our school board, who's key represent that community, because we need to be the ones running for office and sharing our experiences as to why we stand to defend the inclusivity of our school system. So I will stand up and fight for the rights of our LGBTQ plus and our trans children. And we'll spend, and I keep saying this because it really worries me that, I'm running for federal office, but we're training women across New Jersey. I am part of Latina Civic and Center for American Women in Politics. I am part of Ready to Run. I support Emerge New Jersey. I support Run Sister Run, which trains Black women to run for office, because fundamentally we are the ones that have to start running for office at the local level in our school boards. And for a long time, we didn't pay attention to school board races because we thought, our schools are safe. But the Republican Party has a plan to take over our school boards because they want to change our curriculum and our education system. So we need to really support more of our local candidates that are running for school board as demo. And I'm not saying we make the school board elections partisan. I'm saying we need to put more candidates who believe in the values of inclusivity and equal rights and the rights of LGBTQ plus, and we need to get them to run for office and support them. Otherwise, the Republican Party has a 25-year plan to take over our school boards in New Jersey, and we cannot allow them to have a better plan than us. So I will be supporting more candidates to run for local races at the school board level.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just in closing, if you want to give sort of a summary statement or final words about your candidacy and why our county committee and in June, everyone should support you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you. I did an interview with Hudson TV News the other day, and the reporter asked me, you jump in the race 3 months after Andy Kim and Tammy Murphy jumped in the race, and everybody has already made up their mind. It seems like, why do it? Why is it? Why would you now jump when everybody has already made up their mind? And it, why do you think you can do it? And in that moment, when he asked me that, I went back to the 14-year-old girl who came from El Salvador, couldn't speak English, and I went to my school counselor and tell them and asked them in my broken English, what do I need to do to get to college? And I was already in 9th grade, and he told me, I don't think you're gonna get to college. I think that you should focus just on graduating high school and just getting, a regular job. You won't be able to apply. You won't be able to do it. And in that moment, I remember feeling like, wow, somebody already has determined what my choices are. And so when that reporter asked me that, I didn't just think about me. I thought about every Black girl, every Latina girl, every working class girl who people has low expectations for, and who for people who think that just that in order to be able to represent and run for office, you have to be connected to Wall Street, or you have to be connected to big money, or you have to be a political insider to run, or you have to have a godfather who's or un padrino, we call it in Spanish, that props you. But we as working class kids, as the kids of working class people, who are always trying to figure out what is my vision for where I'm going. And that 14-year-old girl who was told that she couldn't get to college, I put in that moment a vision to go to college, because every other Latina girl in that school needed a model to go to college. So I am running for office because every Latina girl in this state, every Black girl in this state who comes from a public school, who comes from whose mother is a housekeeper, whose father is a janitor, who has 2, 3 jobs and has no health insurance, needs to know that this democracy, this government of the people and by the people, needs to include them, needs to include us. If we accept a democracy that only those with money and those with access are the ones who go to Congress and represent our interests, they are not representing the interests of working class people. They're representing the interests of the billionaires and the Wall Street. So in order to save our democracy, and President Biden says that this year is about defending our democracy from the likes of Donald Trump, who would like to tell you that the solutions of our economic crisis are by giving billionaires more tax cuts. The solution for our economic crisis is by kicking out every immigrant out of this country. Those solutions need a counter solution, and the solution of hope, and the solution of power by working people, the solution by power by unions that are the ones that create the middle class. And this daughter of the working class will go to Washington, D.C. and make sure that we change our laws to give power back to working people so that we can counterbalance the power of billionaires. So if you vote for me, you will not just be voting for a candidate that believes that more working people need to be in government, but you will be voting for someone who will give hope to every little girl out there that comes from a working class background, that this government is indeed for the people and by the people. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out this morning. We were recording today, so we'll have a link that's sent out to everyone who couldn't make it, and feel free to forward that link. Our forums seem to be making the rounds all over the state of New Jersey, and I think we should all, as Morris County Democrats, feel really good about that. All right, so thank you.